They laughed as they shaved her hair in front of hundreds of passengers, but 60 seconds later, every phone went dark, and the entire airline shut down. Chicago O'Hare International Airport. 7:02 p.m. The terminal lights were cold and merciless, reflecting off the polished floor like ice. Gate B12 buzzed with passengers waiting for the final boarding call to New York, families clutching carry-ons, business travelers checking watches, tired attendants scanning tickets. Then came the voice that sliced through the noise. "Excuse me, ma'am, your hair violates our grooming standards." Karen Mitchell stood behind the gate desk, her uniform crisp, her smile tighter than her bun. The woman she spoke to, Amara Johnson, turned slowly. She was elegance personified, tailored cream suit, Cartier watch, posture straight as steel. Her natural hair was coiled in soft black curls that framed her face like a halo. Karen's voice hardened. "We can't allow you to board first class looking, unprofessional." Murmurs rippled through the gate. Two male security staff approached, Brad Jensen and Tyler Walsh, both broad-shouldered, both already smirking. Brad adjusted his badge and said, "Ma'am, please take a seat so we can sort this out." "Sort this out," he repeated with an almost playful menace. Amara's eyes didn't flinch. "On what grounds?" "Company policy," Karen replied, reaching into her supervisor kit. "We maintain a standard appearance for all passengers. Natural hair like yours, well, it draws unnecessary attention." Tyler's voice joined in, casual, cruel. "You people always make everything a statement." Monique, a young black employee at the counter, froze mid-task. Her fingers trembled above the keyboard. She opened her mouth to speak, but Derek Stone, the gate manager, snapped, "Policy enforcement. Stay out of it." Brad motioned toward an empty chair by the window. "Have a seat, princess." The word dripped with mockery. Amara sat down quietly. Her calm was not submission, it was calculation. The crowd sensed drama. Phones lifted, screens glowed. Karen's scissors flashed under the sterile light as she stepped behind Amara. "We're doing this the easy way," she announced loudly. "A quick trim to keep things professional." "You will not touch me," Amara said evenly. "Oh, I will," Karen replied, "because this is a family airline, not a fashion protest." The first lock fell, a black curl sliding down the beige carpet. Gasps, then laughter. Tyler chuckled, recording. "Look at this, live from Gate B12. Grooming enforcement at work." Brad grinned. "Bet she smells like coconut oil and defiance." The crowd edged closer, eager for spectacle. Amara did not move. She kept her hands folded in her lap, her gaze fixed ahead as strands of her hair drifted down like dark snow. "Karen," Derek called over the noise, "make sure it's even. Can't have her looking half done." Monique looked away, tears in her eyes. Her voice barely a whisper. "This isn't right." Derek's answer came like a whip. "You like your job. Then follow protocol." Karen kept cutting, snipping through the silence between bursts of laughter. "There we go," she said, voice loud for the crowd. "More appropriate for first class." Someone in the back shouted, "Cut it all off. Teach her a lesson." Tyler zoomed closer with his phone. "Y'all seeing this? Miss High and Mighty getting humbled." Brad leaned in, boot tapping the floor inches from Amara's heels. "You know, sweetheart," he said, "black women always think the rules don't apply. Should have straightened it before you left the house." The laughter rolled over her like a tide. Still, she didn't move. Her watch glinted under the fluorescent lights, marking each second like a metronome of restraint. Karen's scissors caught again. Another lock fell. The sound was sharp, metallic, cruel. "There," Karen said. "Now you look like a professional businesswoman." Silence stretched for a moment. Then, in a voice calm as still water, Amara said, "Continue, please." The words stopped everything. Even the scissors hesitated midair. Karen blinked. What did you say? Continue, Amara repeated softly. You're not finished yet. Her tone wasn't fear, it was authority. Tyler's camera wavered. For the first time, the crowd didn't know whether to laugh or listen. A chill passed through the gate. Derek forced a grin. You heard the lady. Finish the job. Karen smirked again, pushing past her own flicker of unease. More hair fell. The air thickened with humiliation and something else, an undertone of power shifting, too subtle for them to name. Amara didn't cry. Didn't plead. She simply watched her reflection in the gate's glass window, calm, detached, as if memorizing every face watching her. Brad crossed his arms. Guess humility looks good on you. Amara didn't answer. Her phone buzzed once against her thigh, screen lighting up with a name, Sarah, Executive Office. She ignored it. The call went unanswered, like dozens before it. Karen snipped the final strand and stepped back, satisfied. Perfect. Now you look respectable. The crowd murmured approval. Tyler whispered to his stream, that's what happens when they think they're better than everyone else. As the laughter died down, a single business card slipped from Amara's handbag and fluttered to the floor. It landed among the curls, white paper against black hair. The name read, Johnson Aviation Solutions. Nobody noticed. Brad's boot shifted, the card half hidden under its heel. Amara exhaled once, slow, measured. Around her, voices rose again, laughter turning back to chatter. The gate felt colder now. She adjusted her jacket, smoothed her skirt, and stared straight ahead. Are we done? She asked quietly. Karen nodded, mock formal. You may go, after we document this for the report. Of course, Amara said, standing with composure that unsettled even Derek. She picked up her purse, hair uneven, dignity intact. You've taught me something valuable today, she said softly. Karen frowned. Oh yeah? And what's that? Amara met her eyes, expression unreadable. How little power cruelty really has. Then she turned and walked toward the window, her reflection fractured by the glass, surrounded by people who couldn't yet see they had just witnessed the beginning of their own undoing. Behind her, the business card remained on the floor, half buried in black curls, the first clue that nothing about this woman was ordinary. The scene at Gate B12 had turned into something unrecognizable. What began as an argument over grooming policy had become a public spectacle. Dozens of phones were raised, camera flashes cutting through the harsh fluorescent light. The terminal no longer sounded like an airport but an arena. Laughter echoed against the glass walls, cruel and rhythmic. Tyler Walsh stood a few feet away, phone in hand, streaming live to thousands. His voice dripped with satisfaction. Finally, someone humbling these ghetto queens, he said, angling the camera close to Amara's face. Look at that attitude. Still trying to act classy while getting a free haircut. On his screen, laughing emojis and fire symbols flooded the comments. Someone typed, cut it all off. Make her bald. Another, entitled much. Should have stayed in coach. Tyler grinned and read them out loud for the crowd's amusement. People are loving this, he said. 3,000 viewers and climbing. Brad shifted his weight, boot grinding on the floor. Beneath him, the white business card half buried in black curls tore slightly under the pressure. Johnson Aviation Solutions. He didn't see it. He didn't care. Careful, Karen, he joked. You're doing the Lord's work. Karen laughed, scissors flashing in rhythm. I've dealt with worse. These types always think rules don't apply to them. The sound of each cut carried across the terminal, slicing through the hum of airport chatter. A woman near the boarding line, a black grandmother in a blue church hat, stepped forward, trembling with outrage. Stop this, she said, voice cracking. You can't treat people like this. The crowd turned instantly, voices sharp. Mind your business. She broke the rules. If she can't look decent, she shouldn't be in first class. The woman froze, clutching her purse. Her lips trembled, but she stepped back, head bowed. Her courage collapsed under the weight of collective cruelty. Monique, the young employee behind the counter, couldn't watch anymore. Tears streaked down her cheeks as she turned away, pretending to check the computer. Her reflection in the monitor showed pain and shame. She whispered, "This isn't right," but no one heard. Derek, the manager, stood near the gate doors, arms crossed. His voice carried the tone of authority that justified everything. "We're simply maintaining order. The customer must comply." The crowd nodded, eager to belong to something, even if it was wrong. Amara sat perfectly still. Not a word, not a flinch. Her composure unsettled the few who still had fragments of conscience. Her phone buzzed again against her thigh. The screen lit up, Sarah, Executive Office, 15 missed calls. The name lingered for a moment before fading back to black. Tyler noticed it. "Oh, she's got an assistant calling," he sneered. "Maybe Daddy's money can't save her this time." He zoomed closer, camera just inches from her profile. "Y'all see that? Even now, she acts like she's somebody." Amara didn't look up. Her breathing was steady, her eyes fixed on the floor. A single curl fell, landing beside the business card. The image, black hair, white paper, leather boot, looked almost deliberate. Someone behind Tyler shouted, "Make it shorter." Another added, "Give her a buzz cut, like a soldier." Karen obeyed, cutting faster now, intoxicated by the approval. "We have to maintain standards," she said loudly, quoting policy as if it were scripture. "Family airline, professional appearance, no exceptions." Brad leaned over Amara's shoulder, smirking. "How's it feel, princess?" he whispered. "Getting your crown cut off?" She didn't answer. Instead, she looked at his reflection in the glass wall ahead. He didn't notice that her eyes, though calm, were memorizing him, his voice, his face, his badge. Every insult became evidence. Monique turned slightly, just in time to see another lock fall to the ground. She pressed a fist to her lips to keep from crying out. A passenger nearby whispered, "She's not even fighting back." Another replied, "That's because she knows she's wrong." The logic of cruelty always sounds convincing in a crowd. Tyler turned the camera back on himself, performing for his viewers. "Ladies and gentlemen, this is what happens when arrogance meets policy. Maybe she'll learn humility." Comments poured in faster than he could read. "Love it. Finally, justice. About time someone teaches these women a lesson." His grin widened. "Keep those likes coming." The sound of cutting filled the air again. Karen's hand moved methodically, almost ritualistic now. "There we go," she said. "Much better." Strands of Amara's hair covered the ground like ash after a fire. The crowd murmured approval, phones still recording. Derek looked at his watch, satisfied. "We'll be done soon," he said. "Just need her to sign the incident report." Amara finally spoke, her tone soft, almost serene. "You've done what you came to do," she said. "Now you'll have to live with it." The words hung there, quiet but heavy, unsettling in their calm certainty. No one responded. Even the laughter thinned. Tyler lowered his phone slightly, confused by the shift in energy. The crowd didn't know it yet, but something was changing, something they couldn't name. Behind Amara's stillness, there was movement they couldn't see. The phone, the calls, the trampled business card, all small details, forgotten in the noise. But each one was a fuse waiting to ignite. The cruelty continued for a few more minutes, loud and proud, until it began to echo against itself, hollow and tired. By the time Karen stepped back to admire her work, the crowd had stopped cheering. The air felt heavier, the laughter brittle. Monique's tears hit the floor silently, mixing with the scattered curls. Amara sat in the center of it all, silent, watchful, waiting. The audience thought the show was ending. They didn't realize it had just begun. The sound of approaching footsteps broke the uneasy silence. 2 airport security officers entered the scene, their radios crackling. The crowd parted instinctively, still holding up phones as if documenting a crime they refused to name. Derek Stone appeared behind them, his manager badge gleaming under the fluorescent lights. His posture was the kind that came with years of authority but no empathy. He scanned the mess at Gate B12, hair scattered across the floor, passengers murmuring, Karen standing like she had done something noble. Derek adjusted his tie before speaking. "What seems to be the issue here?" he asked, tone already implying he knew the answer. Karen straightened her shoulders. "Passenger refused to comply with grooming standards. I was forced to intervene." Derek nodded once, the gesture of a man confirming his own worldview. "We've been patient, ma'am," he said, turning to Amara. "Grooming standards apply to everyone. We expect professionalism from all our passengers, especially those in first class." His words sounded practiced, memorized, sterile. He was quoting policy like scripture, every syllable designed to sound reasonable while justifying humiliation. Amara didn't respond. Her hands rested calmly on her lap. Her hair was uneven, patches missing, yet her expression was unbroken. She looked at Derek as if she were studying him, not listening. "Do you have anything to say for yourself?" he asked, tone dripping with condescension. Amara lifted her wrist slightly, the Cartier watch catching the sterile light, scattering it in cold fragments across the floor. The clock on the wall read 7 p.m. 20 minutes until the flight to New York. She pressed one small button on the watch's edge. A soft click. Nothing visible happened, but something invisible began to move. Derek didn't notice. No one did. "Ms. Johnson," he continued, deliberately using her name as if it were an inconvenience. "You've disrupted our operations. We can offer you a voucher for a later flight if you're unable to comply with our standards." "Disrupted," she repeated quietly, her tone smooth as silk. "I've been sitting still while your staff enacted their standards." The words were measured, each one placed with surgical precision. Derek exhaled through his nose, feigning patience. "You must understand, this is a family airline. Presentation matters. We've had complaints about inappropriate hairstyles from our premium passengers before. We can't, Amara's voice cut through his speech, not raised, not loud, but impossibly sharp. "You mean the system that allows this?" The crowd shifted uneasily. Phones wavered. Tyler stopped narrating for his live stream. Even Karen glanced toward Derek, unsure whether to keep speaking. He forced a smile. "There's no need to make this racial, ma'am. We enforce the same rules for everyone." Amara's eyes softened, almost pitying. "Everyone?" she asked. "Tell me, Mr. Stone, how many white women have you escorted from first class for having curls?" Derek's smile faltered. He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. The silence that followed wasn't relief, it was pressure. Something in the air changed, like static before lightning. Amara leaned back slightly, her movements unhurried. She looked around the room, at the cameras still pointed at her, at Monique frozen behind the counter, at the black woman in the blue hat standing quietly near the back. "Please," Amara said finally, her tone so soft that everyone strained to hear. "Continue. I'm learning a lot about your company culture." The sentence hung in the air, light and deadly. It wasn't defiance, it was documentation. A few people chuckled nervously, unsure if she was mocking them or surrendering. The officers shifted, waiting for orders. Karen crossed her arms, muttering something under her breath. Derek stepped closer, lowering his voice. "Let's be reasonable. You don't want to make this worse than it already is. Amara met his eyes. Worse, she said. I assure you, Mr. Stone, the worst part isn't happening to me. Her phone vibrated again. Another missed call from Sarah, executive office. The small device trembled against her purse, unseen beneath her calm hands. Derek straightened, clearly uncomfortable. We'll conclude this incident with a written report, he said briskly, eager to end it. Security, please escort her to customer relations. The officers hesitated, unsure. One of them whispered, she doesn't look like she's resisting. Just procedure, Derek snapped. Amara rose slowly, brushing strands of hair from her jacket. Each motion was deliberate, graceful, surgical. She looked at the clock once more. 19 minutes until boarding. You may proceed, she said softly. I wouldn't want to delay your flight schedule. Derek frowned, not catching the faint irony. The crowd had grown quieter, tension replacing laughter. Something felt off, like everyone was standing in the moment before a storm but couldn't see the clouds forming. Amara's watch gleamed again as she adjusted her sleeve, the faintest red light blinking once on its edge before fading into silver. The signal had already left the building. Her calm was no longer submission. It was countdown. 7:09 p.m. The noise at Gate B12 had settled into a cruel rhythm, mockery layered over laughter, the hum of phones capturing every second. Karen leaned against the counter, smug satisfaction painted across her face. Brad crossed his arms, towering behind Amara like a guard over a prisoner. Tyler kept streaming, his voice a blend of arrogance and excitement. Still live, folks, he said. Our princess is calling someone. Maybe her lawyer. The crowd chuckled, emboldened by the humiliation they'd already witnessed. Amara lifted her head, eyes calm, unflinching. I'd like to make one phone call now, she said, her tone quiet but deliberate. Please, give me 60 seconds. Karen scoffed. Call whoever you want, honey. No one's gonna save you. Tyler laughed into his camera. Oh, this is gold. Y'all hear that? She thinks she's in a movie. Amara didn't respond. She unlocked her phone, scrolled to a single contact labeled executive command, and pressed call. Her voice was steady. Sarah, initiate code 7. Authorization, Johnson Alpha 7. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. The terminal remained full of laughter and whispers. Then, without warning, the lights flickered. A low electrical hum filled the air, followed by a synchronized chime echoing from every gate speaker. The monitors displaying flight schedules blinked twice, then turned solid blue. Karen frowned. What the hell? Tyler's phone buzzed, his live stream freezing mid-laugh. The screen went black before flashing a single message in red, Federal override, evidence lockdown. Wait, what? He stammered, tapping the screen. The same alert appeared on every passenger's phone. One by one, devices went dark, notifications dying mid-scroll. The crowd looked around, confused, uneasy. The airport PA system crackled to life. Attention, the voice said, calm and official. Code 7 Federal Protocol in effect. All gate operations suspended pending federal oversight. The laughter vanished. Derek's face drained of color. That's impossible, he muttered. Code 7 doesn't exist. But Amara knew it did. She rose from her seat with quiet precision, brushing the scattered curls from her jacket. The small movements were deliberate, ceremonial. The scissors on the counter clattered as Karen stepped back, suddenly unsure. Amara turned toward Brad. Excuse me, she said softly. He blinked, uncertain, and moved aside. She bent down and picked up the trampled business card from under his boot. A faint smudge of shoe polish streaked across her name, but the gold lettering still gleamed, Johnson Aviation Solutions. She held it for a moment, then tucked it into her jacket pocket like evidence reclaimed. Around her, confusion turned into whispers. Is this part of the show? Someone asked. What's a code 7? Another murmured. Security radios began to buzz, overlapping static and orders. Command, this is Terminal B, what's going on? No answer came. Amara reached into her purse and drew out a black leather ID wallet. She flipped it open slowly. The federal seal caught the sterile light, its silver emboss glinting like authority itself. FAA Senior Compliance Advisor, Level 7 Clearance. The words were simple, but they carried weight. Karen's mouth fell open. No. No way. Derek took a step forward, his voice shaking. Ma'am, what is this? What did you just do? What you failed to do, Amara replied. Follow the law. She turned to the room, her voice carrying farther than before, though she didn't raise it. For the past 20 minutes, this gate has been the site of an unprovoked assault and public humiliation of a federal contractor during official travel. Under Section 259.4 of the Federal Aviation Regulations, this qualifies as a civil rights violation and an immediate Code 7 trigger. Brad blinked, sweat gathering on his forehead. That's not, you can't be serious. Oh, I'm serious, Amara said, and her calm was terrifying. The PA system interrupted again. Attention all terminals. Code 7 Federal Protocol confirmed. All communications under lockdown. Federal security teams en route. The crowd began to shift backward. Phones that had once pointed toward Amara now pointed toward the exits. The same people who laughed minutes ago whispered in panic. Are we being detained? Is this a drill? Why can't my phone record? Karen's face went pale. Ma'am, we didn't know who you were. We were just following policy. Amara asked, eyes narrowing. The word you use when conscience fails. Derek's voice cracked. Miss Johnson, perhaps we can, continue, Mr. Stone, she interrupted, echoing her own words from earlier. I'm still learning about your company culture. Behind her, the security officers who had stood by uncertainly now moved to the perimeter, their radios buzzing with updates. Federal agents inbound. ETA, 3 minutes. Amara looked at the clock. 7:12 p.m. Less than 3 minutes had passed since her call. Tyler stared at his dead phone like it was a weapon turned against him. This can't be real, he whispered. I was just streaming, you were broadcasting evidence, Amara said calmly. And now it's preserved. Karen's knees seemed to weaken. Please, I didn't mean any harm. I was just enforcing. Amara cut her off, her tone soft but precise. You cut my hair, recorded it, mocked it, and called it enforcement. That's not policy. That's power misused. The room was silent except for the distant echo of alarms. From the far end of the terminal, uniformed personnel began moving quickly toward Gate B12. Derek stepped back, muttering, Dear God. Amara adjusted her jacket, collected her bag, and faced the crowd. Ladies and gentlemen, she said, your phones will restore once the evidence has been archived. In the meantime, I suggest you remember what you saw here tonight. Because in a few hours, this will not be a story about grooming standards. It will be a case study in systemic discrimination. The red lights from the approaching security detail reflected in the glass behind her, painting her silhouette in a glow that felt both official and divine. Karen took a trembling step forward. Who are you? Amara looked at her, calm and deliberate. The woman your company pays to prevent incidents like this. Then the first federal officers arrived, voices clipped and urgent. Ma'am Johnson, one said, addressing her by title. We've secured the area. She nodded once, composed as ever. Around her, the crowd finally understood. They hadn't just humiliated a passenger. They had assaulted the very architect of the laws they thought protected them. Amara turned toward the glass window, her reflection steady, the airport lights flickering behind her like the first flashes of a coming storm. Thank you, she said quietly, not to anyone in particular. My 60 seconds are up. 10 minutes later, Gate B12 no longer looked like an airport terminal. It looked like a courtroom carved from glass and panic. Yellow tape sectioned off the area. The laughter was gone, replaced by murmurs and the clicking of government-issued boots. Federal agents catalogued every pair of scissors, every strand of hair, every phone frozen mid-recording. The crowd had thinned, but those who remained stood silent, unwilling to look Amara in the eye. At the center of it all, she sat at a small table by the window, laptop open, the blue glow painting her face in calm precision. Across from her stood CEO Patricia Williams, a woman accustomed to control. Her heels clicked with authority, but her eyes betrayed the dread of someone who had just realized the cost of her employees' arrogance. Beside her was the company's chief legal officer, Margaret Hayes, clutching a folder of compliance documents that suddenly meant nothing. Derek, Karen, Brad, and Tyler stood off to the side, pale and wordless, like defendants awaiting sentence. Miss Johnson, Patricia began, forcing steadiness into her tone. I'm sure we can resolve this misunderstanding professionally. As one businesswoman to another, Amara didn't look up. This isn't a misunderstanding, she said quietly. It's a documented federal civil rights violation. Her fingers moved across the keyboard, summoning a cascade of windows on the screen. Federal statutes, regulatory frameworks, video evidence, timestamps, digital forensics, each line of code mirrored their guilt in motion. Under Title VII of the Civil Rights Act and the Federal Contractor Protection Act, your employee's actions fall under multiple felony categories, she continued. Assault, evidence tampering, civil rights conspiracy, and hate crime enhancement. The words rolled out like a verdict already written. Margaret tried to recover composure. Miss Johnson, surely we can discuss appropriate remedies, appropriate? Amara's tone sharpened slightly. Do you consider public humiliation and forced haircut appropriate conduct toward a federal contractor traveling on official duty? Margaret flinched. Patricia interjected quickly. Our company takes diversity seriously. This is not representative of our values. Amara finally looked up, eyes steady, unreadable. Your values, she said softly, just cost you federal protection status. She turned the laptop so they could see. The screen displayed 6 bold bullet points under the heading Federal Compliance Mandates. She spoke each one clearly, like a judge reading sentencing terms. First, immediate termination of employees Karen Mitchell, Brad Jensen, Derek Stone, and Tyler Walsh. No severance, no reference letters, permanent notation of civil rights violation in their federal employment record. Karen made a faint noise that was part gasp, part plea. Amara didn't look at her. Second, direct settlement payment of $750,000 for racial and gender-based harassment, forced grooming assault, and unlawful interference with a federal contractor. Patricia's jaw tightened. That amount is non-negotiable, Amara said, without emotion. Third, mandatory intersectional bias and anti-discrimination training for all customer-facing employees within 21 days. Not generic diversity workshops, certified intersectional awareness led by federally approved specialists. Margaret scribbled notes frantically, though her hand trembled. Fourth, full installation of the Johnson Aviation Intersectional Dignity Protocol across all operational sites within 60 days. Federal monitoring, quarterly reporting, and random audits. The executives exchanged glances. The name alone struck them with quiet horror. The Johnson Protocol. They all knew it. Margaret's eyes widened as realization struck. You designed that system. Amara inclined her head slightly. 5 years ago. You were one of the first companies to license it, then quietly discontinued it to cut costs. I'm reinstating it permanently. She clicked a key. A schematic of their internal bias reports filled the screen, thousands of data points, color-coded red. Fifth, a public apology from you personally, Patricia, she said. A televised statement acknowledging this incident as a violation of federal civil rights and a commitment to protect women of color from systemic discrimination. Patricia opened her mouth, but Amara's voice continued, unhurried. And sixth, she said, a comprehensive leadership pipeline for women of color, mandatory promotion targets, public transparency, and external audits by minority-led consulting firms. Effective immediately. The silence that followed was heavy. Margaret exhaled shakily. Miss Johnson, with respect, these requirements exceed any standard compliance settlement. We could discuss modified terms. Amara closed the laptop halfway, the soft click echoing through the gate. You don't negotiate justice, she said. You comply with it. Patricia's professional mask cracked. Miss Johnson, I understand your anger, but you must realize the industry implications. You realize nothing, Amara interrupted. Because you never had to. You built a system that normalizes humiliation and calls it policy. And when that system failed in public view, your instinct was to protect the company, not the person it destroyed. Derek looked down. Karen's eyes filled with tears. Brad's hands shook slightly as he held his badge, realizing it meant nothing now. Tyler whispered, I was just filming, you were broadcasting an assault, Amara replied coldly. Federal evidence now. Congratulations on your contribution to civil rights history. Margaret swallowed hard. If we comply fully, will federal prosecution still proceed? That depends on your cooperation, Amara said. But make no mistake, this incident will remain in the record. You can rebuild your company, but not your innocence. Patricia's voice cracked. Miss Johnson, is there any way to? No, Amara said. Only accountability. She opened the laptop again, pulling up another screen. It displayed her digital signature authorizing a federal investigation trigger. The words active protocol glowed in red. This isn't revenge, she said quietly. It's structure. The only language systems like yours understand. Margaret whispered to Patricia, if she initiates that audit, every discrimination complaint from the past 2 years will surface. Every buried case. Patricia's knees nearly buckled. We'll comply, she said quickly. Every term. Immediately. Amara nodded once. Good. Then your cooperation will be noted in the report. She stood, closing the laptop with measured calm. You thought you were enforcing policy. But I was the policy. Federal officers stepped forward, collecting statements and evidence. The 4 employees who had mocked her now stood motionless, surrounded by the machinery of justice they couldn't comprehend. Karen finally spoke through tears. Please. I didn't know who you were. Amara turned to her, voice gentle but final. You didn't need to know who I was. You just needed to know who you were. Patricia lowered her gaze, defeated. What happens now? Amara looked toward the window, where flashing red lights reflected against the glass. Now, she said, we rebuild your company's humanity. One policy at a time. The words were calm, almost merciful, but the meaning was absolute. Justice had changed hands. And this time, it wore no uniform, only composure. Weeks later, America was still talking about Gate B12. News anchors repeated the phrase as if it were a landmark in history. The footage of the assault, once used for mockery, had become evidence. The woman they laughed at was now the face of reform. Every network carried the same image, Amara Johnson standing before a Senate committee, her natural hair cropped short but regal, her expression steady, unshaken. The caption beneath her read, Federal Consultant Leads Inquiry into Airline Discrimination. Cameras flashed as senators leaned forward, taking notes like students in a lecture. This was never about hair, Amara told them, her voice calm, deliberate. It was about weaponized perception, the belief that professionalism must look white to be valid. The words echoed across the nation. In homes, offices, and classrooms, people paused to listen. Hashtags that once mocked her name were now rallying cries. Hashtag Dignity Flight, hashtag Code 7, hashtag Johnson Protocol. The transformation was complete. The same airline that had humiliated her now issued a public apology broadcast live on national television. CEO Patricia Williams stood at a podium, flanked by her legal team, her tone solemn. "We failed Ms. Amara Johnson," she said, "and, more importantly, we failed women of color everywhere who deserve dignity when they travel." Behind her, company banners displayed the new slogan, "Dignity is our policy." Reporters called it the most expensive apology in aviation history. Within weeks, the Department of Transportation announced new compliance standards. Congress moved faster than anyone expected. The Airline Passenger Dignity Act passed with bipartisan support, prohibiting appearance-based discrimination in all federally regulated travel. The law mandated hair, religious, and cultural protections for passengers and employees alike. The text of the bill quoted Amara's Senate testimony, "When dignity becomes regulation, equality becomes sustainable." Across the country, major airlines scrambled to implement the Johnson Protocol. It was no longer optional. Monitors in airports lit up with new digital systems tracking bias reports in real time. Training programs appeared on every schedule. Diversity officers, many of them women of color, took seats at executive tables once closed to them. Even competitors who once dismissed Amara's work began licensing her software. "The system works," said one CNN analyst. For once, accountability didn't come through outrage. It came through architecture. Federal agencies released a joint statement recognizing Johnson Aviation Solutions as a model for intersectional reform. Amara declined most interviews, preferring to let the data speak. She returned to her quiet routines, morning coffee, conference calls, mentoring young engineers. But her face was everywhere. Billboards. Editorials. A Time magazine cover with the headline, "She didn't shout. She structured." One afternoon, while traveling through another airport, ironically the same route to New York, Amara stopped at the security gate. The terminal buzzed with travelers, but the energy was different. Softer. Kinder. She watched a young black employee, Monique, assist a woman with thick natural curls who was struggling with her luggage. "Take your time, ma'am," Monique said, smiling. "We've got all the time you need." The passenger laughed. "Thank you. I was worried about my hair holding up through security." "Honey," Monique said, still smiling, "your hair is perfect. And protected." Amara watched from a distance. No one interfered. No one looked away in fear. She adjusted her jacket and walked on, unnoticed but fulfilled. Justice didn't always arrive with applause, sometimes it arrived as peace. Pain had become policy, and policy had become progress. The storm at Gate B12 was over, but its echo had rewritten the skies. Morning light filtered through the wide windows of Amara's home, painting her reflection in soft gold. A year had passed since Gate B12. The world had changed, and so had she. Her hair, once shorn uneven by cruelty, now framed her face in a crown of natural curls, full, elegant, deliberate. She stood before the mirror in silence, brushing through each strand slowly, reverently. The news played softly in the background, the anchor's voice calm and proud. "The Johnson Protocol is now active in 94% of major U.S. airports," he said. Federal oversight reports show a 73% drop in discrimination incidents involving women of color. Passenger satisfaction among minority travelers has reached record highs. Industry experts call it the most effective civil rights reform in modern aviation. Amara smiled faintly, not from pride but from understanding. The numbers weren't just statistics, they were safety, dignity, and restoration woven into law. The knock at her door was gentle. A delivery courier handed her a small, carefully wrapped package. The return address read, Smithsonian Institution, Civil Rights Division. Inside, cushioned in velvet, lay a pair of stainless steel scissors. The same model used at Gate B12. A small plaque was attached, Exhibit 47, the cut that changed the skies. For a long moment, Amara said nothing. She ran her fingers along the cold metal, feeling neither hate nor anger, only gravity. Those blades had once humiliated her. Now, they were evidence of transformation. She placed them on the counter beside her reflection and whispered, "They cut my hair to make me small. I turned that cut into a law that protects millions." The mirror caught her gaze, calm, wise, unbroken. She no longer saw the woman who endured. She saw the woman who built. On her desk lay letters from young women across the country, students, flight attendants, executives, each one thanking her for making their workplaces safer, their identities respected. The legacy wasn't fame, it was foundation. Amara lifted the scissors again and set them into the display box the museum had sent, sealing them with care. The sun rose higher, light reflecting off the mirror like the beginning of another day. Her voice, steady as ever, carried through the quiet room. "Sometimes the most powerful response to hatred isn't anger," she said softly. "It's architecture." If you enjoyed this story, let us know in the comments. And don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more inspiring stories.